views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hi, and welcome to Open BXRx, BronxNet special coverage providing you the latest information, resources, services, and community efforts taking place locally here in the Bronx and virtually during the pandemic. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, and today is Tuesday, December 15th. Coming up, Congressman Adriano Espaillat joins us to discuss emergency relief, the need for funding of the MTA, the HEROES Act, and legalization of marijuana with the MORE Act. Then, Legal Aid Society and Milbank LLP recently sued New York City for lack of Wi-Fi at homeless shelters. We'll learn more about this lawsuit and how students in homeless shelters have been affected through remote learning. After that, the Justice for All Coalition joins us to discuss NYCHA's new blueprint for change and why they're calling to halt the blueprint and advocating to keep NYCHA public. And two Bronx DJs, DJ Dameluz and DJ Ultraviolet, join us to share how they've been creating through the pandemic. So please stick around. Open BXRx starts now. Welcome to Open BXRx on BronxNet. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, inviting you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. Transit officials recently announced proposed impending budget cuts to the MTA if no federal aid arrives. What will an underfunded MTA look like? Joining us now to discuss funding the MTA, rent relief, and more, including the HEROES Act and MORE Act, is Congressman Adriano Espaillat. Welcome, Congressman. Thank you so much for
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sonyi. Thank you for having me in your program once again.
Claro, thank you. To start, can you please tell us what issues are most affecting your district through COVID-19 and how your office has continued to assist your constituents?
Well, obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic has taken a toll in my district. So the one issue is how do you help the medical institutions? How do you help the local community-based physicians that are trying to open up? Because remember, there are folks with existing conditions that have put them aside for some time now. And so they must be taken care of. And these doctors, community-based doctors, which is where most of my constituents go to, have to now adjust their offices, redo them, have a new ventilation system, a new setup to meet the guidelines of social distancing, have to come up with the cost of PPEs for every single patient that goes there. And so this is a real load on their backs. Most of the patients, by the way, are Medicaid patients, and therefore they get very little in terms of reimbursement from the government for each of the patients they see. So that's the challenge. The hospitals must be equipped and ready to address the second surge. The education component of it is very important. And then the other aspect, the economic aspect with small businesses. I think that the small businesses in the district have done a tremendous job at staying open. You know, they're fighting tooth and nail to keep their doors open. Some of them apply for the PPP program. Some of them got the special grant that Northern Manhattan grant that New York Presbyterian gave. There are new loan opportunities by the city, by the empowerment zone. Also, Councilwoman Ayala in East Harlem was able to get several $1 million for small businesses. So they're fighting tooth and nail to stay open. This second surge could really knock them out. So we got to come up with another round of PPPs, the paycheck protection loans, the forgivable loans, and more grants for these small businesses.
Right. Thank you, Congressman Espaillat. And another issue, that you and 15 other delegation members, including yourself, requested for help in is transportation. Now, the MTA must be included in the next COVID-19 relief. That is what you're saying now. Can you tell us why providing relief to the MTA is important right now?
Because first of all, the emergency workers, for the most part, take public transportation. So for us to get our nurses, our hospital workers, even our doctors to those institutions, they must rely, most of them rely on public transportation. But other emergency workers, delivery people, people that take your food from the restaurants to your house, cashiers that work on supermarkets, livery drivers often take the subway to where their car is. And so this is so important that we have public transportation. I believe very strongly that the economy won't be able to reopen whenever that is safe to reopen unless we have solid, reliable public transportation. For that reason, we included significant dollars in the CARES Act, and we $4 billion. And we also included in the HEROES Act another $8 billion. Now, I understand that the deficit is now another $4 billion at $12 billion. And with this new potential package that we're gonna, which is a stopgap package, it won't be a permanent one by any means. It should put us right through, let's say, February. There's $908 billion in that package. And I am confident and I'm pushing that at least $2 billion will be included for the MTA, $2 to $4 billion, so that they can go back to work. They can function reliably, safe. They got to do deep cleaning at night so that people are safe when they take the subways. And that will put us through February. And then under the new administration, we'll fight to get the amount of money they deserve to have a balanced budget.
Thank you, Congressman. You've also been advocating for rent relief. How has your district been affected by the lack of relief in renting, and what would rent relief look like for them if passed?
Well, right now there's still a moratorium, and in the HEROES Act, we had $100 billion of rental assistance, which is very important because the vast majority of my district is rentals. And so people are not being evicted right now. And those that are attempted to be evicted, we're there to help them out. And I don't see any court or any judge right now evicting someone, throwing them out on the street. But people are backing up on their rent, right? And so some people owe 4, 5, 6 months worth of rent. And they don't have the money to pay that. That's why we need the rental assistance. It's good for the tenant. And by the way, it's also good for the landlord, because they're, if the entire building is not paying them rent, I'm sure they're backed up on their mortgages or could be in trouble with their mortgages. Yeah. So it helps the tenant and their families, and it throws a lifeline also for owners. So particularly small owners, small buildings that may have 2 and 3 apartments that they rent out to pay their mortgage are now facing trouble.
Right. And Congressman, you mentioned the HEROES Act. Can you tell us a little bit more about this act, what it is and who it seeks to help?
Originally, we had a $3 trillion budget in the HEROES Act, which included $100 billion for rental assistance. It included more money for hospitals and healthcare. It also included $8 billion for the MTA. But in addition to that, it included state and local government monies. So that's so important because even if we put as much money as we want to put it from the federal government to fund different programs, if we don't throw a lifeline to the states and the local governments that are they're at the fiscal cliff, they're going to have to implement severe cuts in programs that are very important to all of us and to my constituency. So bringing the help for state and local government is critical to states. Both blue states and red states are facing these types of problems. And they're facing these types of problems because the revenue is not coming in because of the pandemic. The same as the MTA. The MTA functions on a ridership formula, meaning that they get the funding through the number of people, the strap hangers, they use the system. And that's dropped dramatically. So their revenue fall has been dramatic, and as such, puts them in real trouble to function effectively and safely for all strap hangers.
Mm-hmm. We're glad to have you here because we're talking a little bit about everything. There's a lot of updates when it comes to bills, and one of the most recent ones were a bill to decriminalize marijuana. This is the MORE Act. Congressman, can you tell us more about this act and what it seeks to change in communities that have been impacted by the war on drugs?
Well, obviously, the arrest of marijuana offenses fueled, mass incarceration. And so for now, we have New Jersey right next door to us that legalized it. It makes absolutely no sense why we continue to criminalize this marijuana use, recreational use, and medicinal use as well. And so, I'm for it. I think that it would also provide a stream of revenue for government and some economic opportunities for some of our folks.
And as well, Congressman, how can people stay in contact with you and your office with any issues that they have in the community? How can they contact you at this time?
Well, we're still active. We're functioning virtually because the federal government wants to keep it that way. But if you like, you can call us at 212-663-3900. That's our main office. And you can reach us also in Facebook at facebook.com/Espaillat.ny. And you can also, my Twitter account is twitter.com/Espaillat. So you can reach us in all those, at all those numbers. Espaillat.house.gov is another one that you can reach me at. I think that's enough. You can get to me in so many different ways. But yes, we have an office in the Bronx. We have an office in Harlem, and we have an office in Washington Heights. Our office in Washington Heights is on 181st Street on Bennett Avenue. Our office in Harlem is at 125th Street and at Clayton Powell Boulevard, the state office building, the 5th floor. And our office in the Bronx, we share an office with Assemblyman Dinowitz in Kingsbridge Road and 231st Street. So you can all go there, and we have our numbers there because we're not functioning open yet. But when we do open, you can go to those offices. Otherwise, you can call us at the numbers I gave you.
Gracias, Congressman. And one final thing, can you leave us with a message for the community during these times?
Well, first of all, I want to wish the best wishes to everyone during the holiday season. I know it's been a very difficult year for myself and you and everyone. It's been a tough year. I hope that we can come out of this stronger. My condolences to those folks that lost loved ones. Obviously, a great number of people, New Yorkers, lost family members, I know, under very adverse conditions because they couldn't say goodbye to them in an appropriate manner. But my heart and my best wishes go out to them. And then let's come out of this stronger, and let's make sure we break the cycle of health disparities, of diabetes, of high blood pressure, of asthma, and respiratory and cardiovascular problems that are really deadly with this virus. Let's make sure we break with that once and for all. Let's make sure we support our small businesses. And let's give the mental health services to those families that I know are weathering a storm. This has been a tsunami, right? People lost their loved ones. They haven't been able to say goodbye appropriately to them. They lost their business or they lost their job. They've been quarantining with their kids at home in an apartment for 4 or 5 months. So they were in a ventilator, they were fighting for their lives in a hospital. So all of these things together create like a perfect storm. And people obviously will react to that. And we want to make sure we have the mental health services there that they need. So God bless you and keep the faith.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Congressman Espaillat, for your time today.
Thank you.
Congressman Adriano Espaillat represents District 13 that covers Washington Heights, West Harlem, and the Bronx as well in the Northwest. We'll be right back.
those most at risk for coronavirus? People over 65, people with underlying medical conditions like heart disease, chronic lung disease, asthma, diabetes, people undergoing cancer treatment, and people with weakened immune systems. What should you do if you or a loved one is at higher risk? Avoid close contact with people, avoid crowds, stay home if you can, wash your hands frequently, learn more ways to protect yourself and others at coronavirus.gov.
Why should young people care about the spread of coronavirus? Well, we know that people with underlying medical conditions over the age of 60 are at highest risk, but they've got to get it from somebody.
So we're asking everyone to be selfless for others so that we can protect those who are most susceptible.
Not going to bars, not going to restaurants. It all just means physical separation so that you have a space between you and others.
For more information on how you can social distance, please go to coronavirus.gov.
Welcome back. New York City schools have once again shuttered. Yet 8 months into the COVID-19 crisis, thousands of homeless children still do not have the reliable internet access they need to participate in remote learning. Legal Aid Society and Milbank LLP recently filed a lawsuit against the city for failing to provide students in homeless shelters with access to Wi-Fi. Joining us now to share more is Susan J. Horwitz of the Legal Aid Society. Susan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Of course. Just to start, can we just learn a little bit more about the Legal Aid Society and your mission?
So the Legal Aid Society is the largest legal services organization and also the oldest in the country. We provide legal services in a variety of areas to low-income folks throughout New York City, in all 5 boroughs. We are the largest criminal defense organization. We also represent lots and lots of kids who are involved in family court proceedings. And then in the civil practice where I work, we handle housing, benefits, government benefits, disability. We have a low-income tax clinic. We have a worker rights project. Basically, any area of need for legal services, we can probably cover it through the Legal Aid Society.
Thank you, Susan. And can you share more about your work to prevent homelessness and save homes and how this work has continued, especially throughout the pandemic?
So we have an enormous practice in our housing units, primarily for eviction defense. During this current pandemic, there have been some, the moratoriums on evictions have been passed through the state and also through the CDC, but those moratoriums are now scheduled to end unless the governor takes some more action. Our housing lawyers have been working throughout the crisis to make sure that the eviction moratorium is complied with, and also are prepared to start running into court as soon as that is that ends, to ensure that we can keep people in their homes. We also do some other types of housing work involving things like addressing conditions overall in buildings through our group advocacy project. And then we also have our homeless rights project, which is one of the units in legal aid that worked on this case with me from the education law unit, that addresses conditions in shelters.
Let's get into the case now, Susan. Recently, as we said in the beginning, Legal Aid Society and Milbank LLP sued New York City for failing to provide students in homeless shelters access to Wi-Fi. Can you tell us more about this issue and your findings with this case?
Yeah, so pretty much as soon as schools shut down, we started hearing about problems with students being able to access online learning. The DOE did a very commendable job of distributing hundreds of thousands of internet-enabled iPads to students living in shelters and other students. The problem is those iPads all connect to the internet through a cell service. And so if you think about the challenges involved in basically going to school via your smartphone, with one room in the house works, another room in the house doesn't work, and then think about kids in shelters who are usually living with their families in 1 or 2 rooms, often multiple kids in the families trying to get online at the same time and trying to be able to just focus on instruction under some very inhospitable circumstances. Right. And so what we discovered was that there were lots and lots of kids in shelters who were in cell dead zones. Legal Aid Society and Coalition for the Homeless together really tried very, very hard to advocate for some kind of a solution to this, starting in about April of last spring. But the city, for the most part, sort of said, yeah, we'll look at it. Mm-hmm. The iPads work. Maybe we'll talk about like coming out and doing some site visits and checking service. But the city didn't do anything about it until the end of August, when they started actually sending the cell company out to take a look at why there were issues with service in certain places. Mm-hmm. Throughout this entire time, we were really pushing the Department of Homeless Services to start putting Wi-Fi into shelters, because, it's right now the acute issue is the access to remote learning. But if you think about equity in education, every kid who has access to the internet is using the internet to do homework, to do research. And so we've got this whole group of kids in shelters who don't have that opportunity because they don't have internet in the shelters. So, finally, we filed our case a couple of weeks ago after sending a couple of letters to the city saying, listen, you really need to make sure that all these kids can access online learning, and not getting a satisfactory response. And now we're in court. We are litigating the issues.
And when does the city what's the deadline for the city to provide this Wi-Fi in these shelters, Susan? Can you share more about that?
Sure. The demand that we made in our papers was to fully equip all shelters by January 4th. And we selected that day because it's the first day back to school after the winter break. Now, the city did respond to our initial letters expressing concern by noting that they were working on it. They were getting site surveys. They were contracting with resale providers, but that they wouldn't be finished wiring all the shelters until the summer of 2021, which is a full school year of no service. And some schools have opened up K-5 now for families who had already, as of this week, families who had already opted in. But our families are living in the communities that are the most vulnerable and the hardest hit to COVID, because they are Black and Hispanic kids. And that's the community that's been devastated. And so the majority of the parents we've spoken to don't want to send their kids out any more than they absolutely have to, meaning they're not going to send them to school.
Right. And Susan, can you share what the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act is and how this act protects homeless students?
Yes, the McKinney-Vento Act is a federal law that was created to protect the rights of homeless students with respect to education. And, McKinney-Vento was created to remedy issues like kids moving around to different areas, different shelters when they become homeless, and being told, well, you just have to switch to a different school. You're going to have to go to the school that's the closest to the shelter. And when we talk about trying to keep some semblance of stability for kids, staying in the same school can be essential to really managing that terrible traumatic experience of becoming homeless. So McKinney-Vento covers any barrier to accessing education. And so initially it was about things like transportation to the school where the child used to live. But right now we're talking about access to education being fully dependent on being able to get on the internet. And so as we noted in our papers, the internet is the virtual school bus that is required for these students to be able to attend school.
Right.
And McKinney-Vento was also, each of the states adopted their own particular regulations. And it's just really important to remember that this was a protection to ensure school stability and ensure equitable access to education for kids who are going through the terrible experience of homelessness.
And Susan, was the act redacted or changed in order to suit our situation now with students going to school remotely? As you said, it's more about the physical space in the schools and like having access to these spaces, but was the act also changed in order to help with this case now?
No, I mean the act is what it is, but it clearly states that school districts have to remove any barrier to accessing education, not just getting there or being enrolled. It's any barrier to an education. And it clearly anticipates, look, no one could have anticipated a pandemic in the situation that we're in now, but it clearly anticipates that there will be things beyond just literally getting to the school that could come up for kids experiencing homelessness.
Absolutely. And can families contact Legal Aid Society with some of their testimonies on, how it's been going for them in homeless shelters?
Yes. 888-663-6880 is our general intake hotline. 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. every day is when that line is staffed. And that line also, I should say, also serves as our intake line for a whole host of legal services issues. So if folks are having trouble with their food stamps, public assistance, SSI, Medicaid issues, employment issues, unemployment benefits, they can call that line for a general intake. So, but we are absolutely seeking to hear from more families who, may be a little bit under the radar because they haven't been given the tools and they don't know who to call when there are issues with getting online in shelters. And in fact, since we filed the case, we've heard from a handful of families who are living in shelters that we did not know that there was a problem. And so anyone who is experiencing this issue, I really urge you to call our hotline and let us know what's happening.
Thank you so much, Susan, for joining us today.
Thank you. I really appreciate your inviting me on today.
The number to contact Legal Aid Society is 888-663-6880. There you can share your testimony on how you've been affected by the lack of Wi-Fi in shelters and also get other information and resources from the Legal Aid Society. You can also follow them on social media at Legal Aid NYC and go on their website at legalaidnyc.org. We'll be right back.
With coronavirus spreading, people at higher risk must take extra precautions. You're at higher risk if you're over 65 or if you have an underlying medical condition. Please visit coronavirus.gov for more information.
Welcome back. According to the New York City Housing Authority, NYCHA's Blueprint for Change is a set of ideas for improving residents' home while protecting their rights. But many residents express that they're not being included in the conversation. Joining us now to share more about this Blueprint for Change in NYCHA is Kristen Hackett, Executive Committee Member at Justice for All Coalition. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So first, to start off, Kristen, can you just tell us more about Justice for All Coalition and your mission?
Yeah, so we're just a group of neighbors living in Western Queens who have been organizing and educating with our neighbors for the last 4 years because of our concerns about development in our communities and our city. Our roots based in leadership are in the local public housing developments. So the concerns of those residents and public housing as a public good has always been really central to our work. Even when we were fighting Amazon and Sunnyside Yards and other rezonings and projects, our rallying cry has always been, where's the money for public housing? At the same time, we've been working on the ground with tenants to get repair needs met. So as we know, a lot of public housing residents are dealing with dilapidated living conditions that are unhealthy and unsafe. So we have one paid organizer. The rest of us are volunteers, but Stan Morris is our paid organizer and has been working with tenants to submit formal letters of complaint to housing, walking with them to the management offices to try to demand repairs. And we've been moving towards a collective legal strategy to hold NYCHA accountable. And then we've also been working with tenants at Astoria houses now around a gas outage that they've been dealing with for almost 3 months now.
Wow.
And so our mission really is in our title. And as corny as it sounds, it's rather direct as well, right? So we have no real other agenda other than justice for all.
Thank you, Kristen, for that background. And now, as we mentioned in the beginning, NYCHA proposes this new blueprint for change. Can you just tell us a little bit more about this new blueprint for those who may not be familiar?
Yeah, definitely. So one of NYCHA's plans that they say will repair and preserve public housing for future generations is this thing called the blueprint. But like we heard yesterday, it actually ends public housing in New York City by transitioning the units from Section 9 to Section 8. And it also creates this new state agency called a public trust, or that's what they're calling it here. And they use this public trust really not to, preserve and repair the units, but it's really about creating opportunities for private investment in public housing, avenues through which private investors can profit directly from public housing. So this public trust really is being established so it can take on debt. And that money that's being raised will be, in theory, be used to make repairs potentially, but it also creates a long-term debt problem, right? And we have to ask ourselves in these debt-based arrangements, what's the collateral here, right? And these are the properties.
And now, I think you kind of broke it down a little bit, but J4AC is advocating to halt the blueprint. Can you just tell us a little bit more about why it's important for this blueprint to be halted at this time?
Yeah. So again, we feel that this is the end of public housing, and really that this is the continuation of a lack of care rather than a departure from it. And again, our question is, where's the public money? We can offer tax breaks to developers and to homeowners, allocate $6 million for the NYPD, fund a military that's larger than the next 7 largest, and we cannot fund public housing. And this isn't about whether or not there is public money, right? This really is about political will, right? So we're really, with the Halt the Blueprint, we're trying to influence that political will.
Thank you for sharing. Also, the State Assembly Housing Committee recently held a hearing to discuss this blueprint. Some NYCHA residents were able to attend, but many were left out of the conversation. What happened at this hearing, and were there any resolutions or issues that came up?
Well, so the meeting was just to discuss new legislation that NYCHA's put forward. There's been nobody has even sponsored the bill yet, and it sounds like a lot of folks, state reps haven't even heard of it or just got it yesterday or in the last week or two. So this was really just sort of to have a first conversation about the legislation. I'm not sure why they did it in a hearing style, quite frankly. But what came out of the hearing yesterday was a lot of opposition on the basis that this is privatization and that there's a real loss of rights for residents living in public housing right now, and that this is permanent. Residents continue to note the lack of awareness and understanding of the bill among residents that seemed very widespread. And even Greg Russ said that they only talked to like 1,100 tenants. In other cases, he said 2,000, but even that's less than 1% of NYCHA residents. And there was also a lot of discussion about this, where's the public money, and also what can we, how can we start to move towards resident management, right? Why are residents not at the forefront of these decisions? And actually, based on their legal rights within Section 9, as public housing is regulated right now, they should be at the forefront of that decision. And it really felt like, I have to say, I guess that there did feel like there was political will in the room to pursue these alternative options. And that was kind of something we didn't know whether or not we could expect at the time prior to the hearing.
Kristen, how are these correspondences being sent out by NYCHA to residents? Why are so many people not being included in the conversation? And is it due to the technical divide, the digital divide, not having access to internet, things like that?
We definitely hear a lot about the challenges that technology presents. We actually deal with some of that in our own organizing work, trying to use Zoom to hold tenant meetings, because a lot of people don't have access to internet or to the hardware needed or stable connections. So that's definitely part of it. It also sounds like the outreach strategies that NYCHA used were unsuccessful and definitely not enough, right? They said they put things in people's rent statements, but we also heard from residents that they never got those. And they said they use social media, which again is sort of the technical divide. We've also heard that language barriers have been very real. And I did attend a couple of the town halls, and at the ones I did attend, there was no translation available as far as I could tell. It sounds like that's something they started to address later in the sessions. But I also think, and this we hear from a lot of residents, and even just as people probably feel it ourselves, like we're in the middle of a pandemic that hit public housing developments twice as hard. The fatality rates were more than double the city's overall rate. People are grieving. I know one woman that lost 60 people.
Wow.
You know, there's a lot on people's minds, and there's a lot that folks need, like food and economic insecurity is also something that in our neighborhood community members have stepped up, you know, to help fill the gap and try to provide. But where is NYCHA and our city reps in providing this? And then the blueprint got announced right after the first wave sort of started to subside, and now is being negotiated at a state level hearing right as the second wave seems to be taking off. And there's a lot of fear, right? So people already have a lot of stress going on, even if there was robust engagement from NYCHA, which there wasn't, but even if there was, the timing of all of this is just like inhumane and cruel. I don't know how else to say it, really.
Got it. And I've seen, Kristen, that J4AC proposed CLTs and RMCs. Can you help us break down what these things are and how they can help residents moving forward?
Yeah, so we're not proposing CLTs for public housing, but we are proposing resident management corporations, so resident management corporations are an available avenue through which public housing tenants can collectively take on full or partial management responsibilities of their development. This is something that's written into Section 9 already. The idea for them grew out of the civil rights and welfare rights movements of the 1960s and tenants' frustrations about dilapidation and mismanagement, which sounds very familiar to today.
Yes.
Multiple resident management corporations emerged in the 1970s and 1980s, and in 1987, RMCs were legally codified into law as a governance option for public housing residents. And in 1992, HUD did an extensive evaluation of 11 of these, comparing them to each other and to the Housing Authority, and found that full-service RMCs, where residents took on all resident management responsibilities, were definitively superior managers. These developers were better maintained, had robust social service programs, created more employment opportunities for residents. Evictions and turnover were less frequent, and their operating expenses were lower. Tenants' positive perceptions of their quality of life also reflected these changes. This evaluation suggests that RMCs are capable of addressing the multiple issues public housing residents face. So this is just one model that we're putting forward in terms of alternative governance structures. It still relies on public funding, so we need the public money to happen. And we've started documenting where that public money could come from on a new website called NYCHArising.info. There's a series on there called Where's the Money? And it basically just has separate posts on, you know, what's already been proposed and suggested for the public money, and will, you know, continue to do that. But it also, you know, we can always suggest models right now, but ultimately there has to be robust resident engagement in terms of figuring out what the future of public housing should look like.
Got it. Kristen, can you just tell us why it's important to keep NYCHA public housing public?
Yeah, so public housing is the only truly affordable housing option in New York City, and we heard that a lot from folks yesterday. But it's a housing of last resort. It keeps a lot of families and a lot of seniors from homelessness. And as many said yesterday, it's also provided stability because of this affordability mechanism. And that stability is intergenerational. So it does actually create a foundation of social mobility that we don't typically see. It's also a major public institution. So investing in public housing is also a matter of the priorities of our society, right? Whether we're going to actually preserve and invest in public goods for the people, or whether we're going to continue to transform everything into commodities or assets that can be profiteered off of by a global financial class. And we've been dealing with, the prevailing dominance of free market logics for the last 30 years, and inequality has swelled dramatically. But this is also about race and class justice. So we have to take very seriously about who finds themselves living in public housing today. NYCHA tenants are predominantly Black and brown, and this is not a fluke, but a reality designed by the racist and classist history of our country, our city, and our world. And the lack of care given to public housing residents today, and the lack of control they have so far over the future of public housing, is a continuation of this history. And any plan attempting to rescue NYCHA must account for and address this reality. Public investing in these properties and putting residents at the forefront of any decisions about the future of public housing is about race and class justice and a just future for all, really.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for your time. And how can people stay connected with J4AC, get resources and information on the Blueprint for Change plan? As you said, there's a lot of information going back and forth with, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, so a lot of people don't have the resources or information. Just provide any numbers or emails, contact information at this time.
Yeah, definitely. Folks can find us on Instagram and Twitter at justice for the number 4, all, and then QNS. And our website is J4, again, the number, ac.us. Another educational resource is nicharising.info, which is another website. And people can call us at 646-705-8887.
Thank you again, Kristen, for your time today.
Thank you.
Kristen Hackett is the executive committee member over at Justice for All Coalition. We'll be right back.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community, and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting to the new reality.
Reporting from Bronx, this is Trans.
Welcome back. Despite the uncertain times, artists of all mediums have learned to sustain their own creative routines through different avenues. How are DJs exploring new alleys for self-expression and performance? Joining us now to share more are two DJs from the Bronx, DJ Dameluz and DJ Ultraviolet. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you for
Thank you
having
for
me.
having us.
Of course. So first to start, let's start with DJ Dameluz. Can you just tell us about yourself and your work as a DJ?
Well, I've been DJing professionally since 2007. I'm originally from the Bronx. I currently reside in Philly. I've been DJing back and forth and between Philly and New York for the duration of my time here. I produce events as well. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And DJ Ultraviolet, if you want to talk a little bit about yourself and your background as a DJ as well.
Okay. My name is DJ Ultraviolet. I'm born and raised in the Bronx. I've been DJing less than a year, actually. I started DJing during quarantine because I just really wanted to learn. And I feel like quarantine was like the perfect time to, finally get into it because I love music. I've always loved music. And I also do photography too. So having photography and having music put together, like, definitely inspired me to DJ. Like, because I go to a lot of parties all over the city, and that always like inspired me. I'm like, oh my God, I wish I could like play for my friends and like, so it's fun.
Nah, I love that. And I love that we have you both here and you have like different experience levels. So like DJ Dameluz has been doing it way longer and DJ Ultraviolet just started. So it's like having you both speak about how you've been impacted through the pandemic with your work is really, really incredible. So first, I'm gonna just mention like shout out to y'all. You're both hermanas from Dominican Republic, like
Yes.
Dominican from the Bronx and everything. So representing. And we don't see it often, but there's DJs, there's femme DJs, there's Dominican DJs out here doing their thing, and y'all are doing it. So shout out to y'all. What made you each pursue DJing, and were there any challenges on your individual journeys? Anything like impacting or revelatory in your journey as a female Dominican DJ?
Well, starting back in like 2005, 2007 is when I started doing it professionally. There weren't a lot of women in general in DJing. So the obstacles I had to overcome were like, obviously like a lot of like, misogyny in nightlife. And just like doing my best to inspire other women and teach other women the craft. And in the last, it's been like 13 years, it's almost like a dream come true, just like tuning in to all these women DJs, like it's amazing.
And did you teach yourself? Is this something that you learned by yourself?
I did teach myself.
Oh.
Yes. That's awesome.
And Carlita, you want to chime in as well about like how your journey has been and like how, any challenges that you face as a DJ immersing now?
When I first started, I'm thankful that I had a lot of friends that wanted me to learn because they know how I feel about music. And I'm so grateful for like the support system that I have around me because they really like pushed me to start. And it is different being a woman, woman DJ, because it's such a male dominated field, and it goes the same like with photography, it goes hand in hand. It's very male dominated, and I feel like it's an honor. Like I love being a woman DJ. Like, and even sometimes when I spin like at certain places, like I always get such good feedback from other women. They're like, yes girl, yes sis, like I see you. And like that brings me so much joy because like when I first started DJing, I said I want to DJ for two types of people, which is women and dancers. And if like I want to go out and I'm like, I want to hear music that's gonna have me dancing the whole time, having me and my girls having fun, like, and it's been challenging because I'm still learning, you know what I mean? So it's I learn every day, and like I am self-taught as well. So it's cool to just discover like new talents, with myself.
And now you both have another challenge, and that's the pandemic. You know, obviously DJing has kind of like felt the brunt of this pandemic because partying and all that is kind of like at a down still. You know, we haven't been able to go to the clubs. I say clubs instead of clubs. We haven't been able to go to the lounges, you know, so like we haven't been able to enjoy your music like we used to before the pandemic. How have you been impacted personally, and how has your craft been affected by the pandemic?
Well, for me personally, I've been doing this full time for the last like 13 years, producing events, most recently for like Live Nation. So yeah, it's put me out of work for the most part. Like it's halted my career, but you know, like Ultraviolet was saying, like I have a background in photo as well. I just took this time to basically teach myself other skills like, you know, video and editing and just trying to like create content. Yeah.
Making it happen whichever way you can.
Yeah.
Did you want to chime into Ultraviolet about how it's impacted you?
Well, it's definitely been an impact for all of us, you know, especially creatives. You know, the lack of art shows happening, the lack of events happening. But I took advantage and I said, okay, well, since this is going on, let me DJ outside. So a lot of times, you know, certain venues that I spun at, like I would be DJing inside and then the music would be outside in the sidewalk and stuff. So it would become like a little block party type of energy, and it made me happy because it's like we had just a few hours to get our minds off of things and just enjoy each other's company and stuff like that. And you know, I've just tried to keep myself busy and keep creating. Like it's really hard. It's really hard to be in good spirits all the time and to motivate yourself and to wake up in the morning and choose to be productive, you know, because we have so much time on our hands now. I feel like the best thing to do is just to continue to be motivated. And, you know, I just took my time to create like this whole pandemic. Like, you know, I'm blessed that I was able to learn how to DJ during this time, and still do my photography as well and just move everything to a virtual sense. And I mean, I do like the virtual thing too, though, because it becomes more permanent and it's like people could see it. You know, if they missed out on it, like they could see it. You know, so it's just also learning how to move everything to virtual, which is different. So.
Right. So I just want to, like, before we go, I want to share any special projects that you've been working on individually and, you know, any recent releases or music playlists that you want to share with folks. So if you want to like share that first, DJ Dame Luz.
So most recently I've been working on content. I'm working on a series interviewing particularly Afro-Latinx artists, music artists, in the Bronx, starting, you know, with the birthplace. I just interviewed an artist named Sasso. I'm editing that whole process right now. So that's gonna come out pretty soon, likely through YouTube. I did a mix for a collective called Ghetto Witches recently, and an interview with them. So you could find that on their IG and their SoundCloud, Ghetto Witches with a Z at the end. And what else was it?
What's your at so that people can also follow you and see your work as well?
I'm at DJ Dame Luz.
Yeah.
I love that name. That name is so fly, girl.
Word.
Thank you.
I love it.
I just want to give light and get light back. You know what I'm saying?
Love it.
And Ultraviolet, you can also share your ads and any handles and any projects that you have right now.
Okay. So I released a playlist last week called Pon Eco en la Cama. And it's a Christmas playlist. It's a holiday playlist. It's meant for you to play with your family or be, you know, just chilling with your friends or whatever, or limpiando en tu casa. Like, it's just, It's for every type of vibe that you have. And, you know, it's really based on house parties, us growing up, and always our parents or whoever was the host of the house being like, oh, put your coat on the bed. So Ponga el coat en la cama was the name. And yeah, I made it with a lot of love. And, you know, the feedback has been amazing because I just want everybody to be happy and enjoy their holidays because this year has sucked so bad. So, you know, I made that playlist. I'm also gonna start my Twitch channel next week. So you can watch me spin online, my little virtual show. It's gonna be called the Violet Sessions. So it's gonna be really fun. So check it out. It's coming out next week. And my information is DJ Ultraviolet _ on Instagram. And my Twitch channel is DJ Ultraviolet 07. So
thank you. Thank you for sharing. And I just wanted to mention, I love that name too. Pon el coat en la cama. And I commented under her page after she released it. I'm like, I'm the baby on the coat in the parties when people are having the house parties.
The random baby. Yeah, the random baby. I kind of wanted to like Photoshop myself like on a bed with the coats, but you know, that's
girl, do it. No, but thank you both so much for your time, and thank you for, you know, still dedicating the time and love and energy into your crafts as women and women of color, Dominican women from the Bronx. You know, super proud to see your faces and your spins behind the music. So thank you for bringing joy through music to people as well during these tough times.
Thank you.
Thank
Sonyi.
you.
Of course. Thank you for doing this, Sonyi. Like, you're the bomb.
Of course, no, it's a pleasure having you both, and I'll give your ads as well right after. So folks, you can follow DJ Dame Luz at DJ Dame Luz on social media. Also DJ Ultraviolet at DJ Ultraviolet on social media. It's not hard to find them; they'll be right there. So thank you all for tuning in. That's all for our show today. I'm your host Sonyi Lopez, wishing you and your family safety and wellness now and always. Tune into those playlists so that you can get your spirits up during these tough times.
Yes.